Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, Jeff Currier, and Royce Coop, where we break down the stories shaping our country.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I am joined by my two colleagues, Royce Coop, who is a Sun columnist, but also a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba, and by Sun columnist Jeff Currier. And we're here today to talk about the federal election. Because it is creeping ever closer. We are very close, and our offices here in Winnipeg are really right next door to an Elections Canada site. And I've never seen so many staff. Man, there's got to be like 40, 50 people here all the time. And I was talking to a few of them, and people are coming in to vote already. Because I guess if you're going to be out of town or if you need to vote for a certain reason, they can help you with that. They don't turn votes away. So lots of excitement, especially when we walk through the building right now and hearing and seeing all the staff and people coming in with their trying to get their voter ID and stuff changed. So we're heating up. The election is getting closer. We're less than a couple of weeks away from the time we tape this. And I think the big topic right now that we want to talk about is the idea of the I liken it back to the Elvis Presley days. Who was that? Colonel Sanders? Not Colonel Sanders. What was his name?
Colonel Tom Parker.
Thank you, Colonel Tom Parker. He sold the I Love Elvis buttons, but at the same time, he sold the I Hate Elvis buttons and made a fortune. And now we're seeing Trump buttons or style buttons show up at conservative events, but this is being done by the Liberal Party. Royce, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of steamed about it, to be honest. And so I think most people would be familiar with the story, but what happened is that there were these people from the Liberal War Room in Ottawa who went to the Canada Strong and Free Conference. It used to be the Manning Center Conference where conservatives go. And they planted a bunch of Trump-themed buttons, Stop the Steal, a bunch of stuff that was designed to kind of connect the Conservative Party to Trump and to the Republican Party. And then these geniuses went to a bar in the middle of Ottawa, a few steps from Parliament Hill, and were bragging about it, and they were overheard by a CBC journalist. And so when this dirty tricks campaign was raised, Mark Carney's response to it wasn't to fire the people, it was to reassign them. And we don't even know who they are. They won't tell us who did this. They just got moved into a different role. Now, I think some people say, like, well, what's the big deal? It seems kind of harmless. I don't think it is harmless. I think it's a dirty tricks campaign. It's people engaging in this kind of sneaky business that alienates people from politics. When people say that politics is a dirty business, when decent people of good moral standing say, well, I'm not going to run for office, this is part of the reason why. Because they see it as a kind of dirty business for sneaky people, and it hurts democracy as a result of that. I think it also shows you, every liberal government in Canadian history that gets long in the tooth, it gets arrogant, it starts to put party before country, and we see this sort of thing happening. In the early 2000s, we saw the sponsorship scandal that in part saw the Liberal Party kicked from power. Now we're starting to see the same kind of entitlement, the same kind of arrogance coming out of this long in the tooth Liberal government. I think it's terrible. I wouldn't dismiss it at all.
No, I agree with Royce. This is not the kind of thing that should be offhandedly dismissed as, oh, well, these things happen in election campaigns. It's a reflection of just what a filthy business politics can be. And candidates are dropped by all parties for far less egregious offenses than this.
Yeah.
That these people are still working for Mark Carney and the federal Liberals is unconscionable. It's beyond contemptible that Carney is allowing these same people to continue to work for his party. And these are the people who want to govern our country, who want to make the laws of our land and tax and spend your money. And this is the ethical bar that they have set for themselves.
It says a lot about Carney as a leader, in my opinion. It says an awful lot about Carney as a leader. And I will be the first one to tell you that politics is the dirtiest business I've ever seen. I spent my career in the private sector. I got into politics and it was dirty. It turned my family upside down. It impacted my kids. It impacted my grandkids. The tricks that parties would play, the tricks that the NDP would play or the things that they would do, but also your own party. when you get inside politics. It is a dirty game, guys. But I agree with you both that this is wrong, that this should be called out, that if you're going to be the leader, if you're going to be somebody that is respected, he should have acted with with a different moral compass. I think I would have fired each and every one of them and identified them for sure, as opposed to moving them around. But it is a dirty business, right? I mean, Jeff, you've seen it. You've covered
Mhm.
politics for years. You know just how dirty it can be. When is it
Mhm.
going to change, or is it going to change? I don't think it will.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it will either. In fact, if anything, it's gotten worse in my years observing politics. This kind of underhandedness, this lack of any kind of ethical standard on the part, not of everybody, of course, but there's always an element in every party that just has no ethical standard at all. Will do whatever it takes to win. And I know that you unless you win, you can't govern, and you can't accomplish anything unless you're governing. However, at what cost are you prepared to do that? At what cost? And for some people, there's no answer to that question because there is no limit. There's no depth to which they will not stoop in order to win and to gain power.
Yeah, it won't. It won't change as long as leaders don't give out real sanctions to people that engage in this kind of behavior, as Carney did. We still don't know who these people are. They have been reassigned, whatever that means, where they put onto sign duty on a campaign. I doubt it, and that really raises the concern of who these people are. Are they pretty senior people in the campaign? Is the reason that Carney isn't firing them because he can't? It would be too embarrassing to do that to people that are senior in the Liberal Party, senior in his campaign. I do know that there are great people in all of the parties. Really impressive, upstanding people, and this sort of thing really turns them off. This sort of student union politics, sneaky type of stuff. I really can't say enough negative things about
You
it.
know, I'm asked an awful lot about politics, and I've seen comments where, oh, you need to pay more to get really good people. It's got nothing to do with the pay. I'll be quite honest. It has to do with the dirty politics and the backroom antics that go on in politics. I would never suggest to any of my friends or my worst enemy that if you want to make things happen, get into politics. That would be the last thing that I would tell them because you're going to get attacked no matter what. And that's politics. But let me ask you this, because as you're talking, it hits me this way. Are we focusing on the right thing? Because, okay, Carney didn't do anything. Is it because he's a bad leader, or is it just because it really doesn't matter who's at the head of the party anymore? It's all the backroom people and the people behind the curtain, if you will, that are running the show. They're running the party. They're going to run the government. It really doesn't even matter who gets elected. It's a machine, and that machine is operating the whole thing.
Well, it may be. Royce may have some thoughts on this, but it may be that given the short attention span of the general public, that we're probably the only three people left in Canada still talking about this story.
You could be right. I mean, leaders are important in Canadian politics, and eventually Carney will kind of become master of his party. He's only been the leader for a few weeks. He's only been in politics for a few weeks, and so the idea that he has total control of the party and that it's not him being run by the network of people that were pretty much all around when Trudeau was prime minister. It's probably not the case. I mean, a lot of the same ministers are running, a lot of the same advisors are in the background running this campaign. We're getting the same old Liberal Party. And so, eventually Carney will become an important leader if he sticks around beyond this election, if he wins. But right now, yeah, I think that's probably correct. There is a separate group that's kind of running the show.
I want to get into about some of the important things missing from this election discussion, but I want to just interject here. I'm going to show a quick video of Wab Kinew in the legislature because this gets to leadership. Because as somebody who was in party politics, I have a really difficult time being able to tell you that yes, or being able to support the notion that the leader of a party actually gets to do or make the changes they want. It's run by somebody else. I've witnessed it. I've seen it. It's hired guns. It's, it's consultants. It's whoever can, talk the talk, gets the money, and they run the party. But Here's an example of that. It's Wab Kinew talking in the legislature about the current Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba leadership race going on, talking about how Wally Doddridge is selling all the memberships, but the establishment is going to put in Abi Khan. So let's just take a quick look at that.
But we all know what's really going on here. We all know he's fronting because there's a PC leadership contest going on. And the PC leadership contest, it's the most magical time of year because every single time they have one, there's an establishment candidate, and then there's the exciting candidate who inspires a lot of people in rural Manitoba. And just like every other contest, that exciting candidate from outside Broadway is selling tons and tons of memberships. He's got way more support. But the magical part is when they go count the votes, somehow all that support's going to disappear and the establishment candidate is going to win yet again. So to longtime PC supporters who are disillusioned with these shenanigans, I would say this: we're reopening rural ERs. We cut the gas tax. We're working hard for you. Come on over to us in the next election.
Okay, Royce, what do you think about this, Royce? What do you think?
Well, I mean, a question period, the legislature, it's kind of like, when you sometimes meet people and they're really weird, they have really weird families, and you say, wow, that's really weird. But when you're a member of the family, you just get used to it. And so you just kind of accept it after a while. That's kind of what question period is like. I mean, I think most people, if they watched question period and they saw what Wob, the way he conducts himself, it's like, oh, that's weird. That's strange. Why is this necessary? The election is 3 years away, and yet we get all this kind of sloganeering, attacks, et cetera, et cetera. And the best response to that is to simply say, this is none of your business. This is an internal party race. You shouldn't be sticking your nose into it. Thank you for your commentary. Very interesting. But we'll talk to you when there's an NDP leadership race or when there's some sort of internal race in the NDP. Until then, I wouldn't worry about what the Premier says.
Yeah, it is weird because Wab Kinew might be the only person in Manitoba who's talking about the PC leadership race.
You know what? You're absolutely right. I think he is the only one talking about it.
But that was a flippant thing to say, but it's true. But the other thing is that it is none of his business. This is cheap party politics. It's politics at its absolute cheapest, and this is the kind of thing that gets reported, though, because the average Manitoban is not tuning into question period, I can assure you. So the only way people know about something like this is if the people who are covering the ledge pick it up and publish it. And that's the story that gets published. Not where our economy is at, not how we're dealing with tariff issues, not whether or not we're moving our economic needle forward, but whether or not Wab Kinew has something to say about the PC leadership. The people who are reporting it like that have either been poorly trained by their mentors or they're just too damn lazy to do real journalism. It's got to be one or the other.
I hated question period. I thought it was the most ridiculous waste of time that I've ever experienced. And the worst part was the getting together as a caucus to talk about ways that you could go after the other party and, all the talking points that they would give you and who to stand up and when to applaud and when to yell shame. I hated it. Anyways, I think, Jeff, you make a really good point is what about the economics? So let's switch away from the province because the province is the province and we're going to keep spending until we use everybody's money and we go further and further in debt. But for a federal election, it seems odd to me. I did some research and discovered that during the 9 years so far of the Liberal government, the bureaucracy has grown by over 110,000 employees, and cost of living, as we all know, has gotten higher. Nobody seems to be making this an issue in the election.
No, and Royce, I don't know what your thoughts are on this about why the serious economic issues, because really what it comes down to, our government is really about the wallet. I mean, generally, Canadian governments of whatever stripe, of either stripe, have generally passed reasonable laws for this country's history. But the economic policies can vary greatly, and yet people tend to kind of glaze over. But that's really about the wallet. It's about how our money is taxed. It's about how our money is spent, how our economy is moving along, and our economy is not moving along. The country is increasingly in debt, and the debt is becoming less and less manageable. And we've talked about that on this podcast before. And our productivity levels in Canada are low. The carbon tax, which has come to an end, it was going to come to an end no matter whether it was Carney or Poilievre. But even by the government's own standards, it doesn't appear to have accomplished what it was supposed to have accomplished. In fact, Canadians are just poorer. The parliamentary budget officer has said that the average Canadian family is poorer by about $700 a year thanks to the carbon tax. And yet it didn't really accomplish what it was designed to accomplish. So, but these issues are not front and center in this campaign somehow. It's about buttons. It's about some candidate who walked marched in the wrong parade 10 years ago, or somebody else's Facebook posting from 12 years ago. I mean, that's the kind of minutia that we get reported now, rather than serious, accurate, upfront, here's where your money is going, folks, journalism.
Yeah. So in 1993, Kim Campbell infamously said that an election campaign is no time to talk about policy. Or to have serious policy discussions, and she got into big trouble for that. But there is a little bit of truth to that. In modern election campaigns, it's hard to have a serious discussion. It's about sound bites. It's about the daily announcement that's going to captivate the media and keep the party leader in front of the cameras. I think that in this campaign, I think that's been very frustrating especially for the Conservatives, is that the Tories have made some pretty good policy announcements. I think there's been some days where they've really knocked it out of the park. It hasn't really had a big effect in the polls, so that we might be starting to see that, because this election, it's been about vibes. It's been about how people feel about Trump and about how they feel about the leaders. And there was this kind of sense at the start that Mark Carney was this kind of impressive person with these credentials. He was the man to take on Donald Trump in this situation of terrorists. It's been very hard to dislodge that impression, in part because the media has kept their focus. We know from polls that Trump isn't the number one focus. It's the economy. It's the cost of living. People are still concerned about these things, but we've just seen this relentless focus of the media on Trump and tariffs and the drama of all of that. And so it's been very hard to have a real policy discussion in this campaign.
But isn't it? I mean, the media is just controlling the narrative. I mean, let's be honest. I did a column in the Winnipeg Sun and used a few examples of questions that were being asked of Poilievre. And if you look at the questions being asked of Carney, I mean, the CBC, they might as well be wearing Vote Liberal T-shirts, as far as I'm concerned, when they do their newscasts and stuff. But to ask Poilievre, like one reporter asked Poilievre, if he became prime minister, will he, increase the size of the, our national forces, our army, because Trump was going to invade Canada? What kind of a stupid question is that? That's the stupidest question I've ever heard. And how is that person even called a journalist or still working? And if they're CBC, I'm paying for that. I want my money back. Like that's crazy. Some of the other questions were just ridiculous. And you can go online and look up some of these questions. It boggles my mind. And then you hear the media complain that, some politicians or Poilievre won't take questions from certain reporters. I wouldn't either. I mean, if you're going to ask a stupid question, why are you even there? You're just wasting all of our time. So I agree. And I think that's what Jeff was trying to say. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jeff, but I mean, really, I'm so tired. And I think it's the media's fault. And I've seen in our last podcast, people commenting, well, you're the media, you're this, the Winnipeg Sun is no better. It's like, oh, come on. Like, what are we doing? Are we asking Carney questions about, well, are you going to make sure, when are you going to stop people from buying gas? We're not asking questions like that. The CBC's not asking questions of Poilievre. I haven't once seen anybody ask Carney why he quoted Marx in a book.
Yeah.
That's a big deal as far as everyone took history. We know what that's all about. And he can quote him in a book and no media is making that a big deal? Come on.
Yeah, I think the quality of the journalism in Winnipeg Sun is outstanding. And we're lucky we got the paper back. Thanks, Kevin.
This is not a paid-for announcement, by the way.
No, but that's my objective opinion. But it's at some point we have to kind of think about, when it comes to the CBC, we've got one party that's promised to defund the CBC and another party that has promised to boost funding for the CBC. wow, I wonder if it might lead to some kind of unconscious or conscious bias in the way that reporters cover those campaigns. And I think just objectively, when I look at some of the questions that get asked of those two leaders, that when it comes to some of the comments, I, the bias in the CBC reporting is clearly evident to any fair-minded person that looks objectively at it, I think.
Well, Jeff, you've
And
been in the business for a long time, and I have a lot of respect for you. Can you imagine asking a question like that, or even being told because Carney's going to give you more money that you have to be nice to him?
no, and clearly, you're talking about, as Royce has said, one guy says we're going to give you another 150 million. The other guy says we're going to defund you. Well, I mean, we're all human beings, and even the finest journalists at the CBC, and there are many outstanding journalists there. You can't help but be influenced by that. But my question generally for the CBC would be, you're very fond of diversity and all that sort of thing. How many people in your newsroom vote conservative?
Hmm.
How many conservatives do you think work at the CBC? And I'm not saying that there has to be absolute equity, that there has to be, the proportional. That's like Justin Trudeau's first cabinet or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's widely believed that the CBC is not a conservative friendly environment, and so you're naturally going to get more left of center viewpoints on the CBC. Now, is that a reflection of what Canada is all about? Because the CBC is supposed to reflect what this country is about, and I don't think it's been doing that kind of a job for many decades now. And a rethink of, I mean, this is a much longer conversation about where the CBC should be going, but I felt for a very long time that the CBC should get out of the business of producing comedies and dramas and do what it does best. Do documentaries, do journalism, do interview shows, do what you do best, and leave the entertainment part of the business to the people who do that much better than you do.
Well, you watch some of their political shows, and it's like entertainment. Like
Well,
it's like it's scripted, like, and some of it I think is funny. I haven't. I find it very difficult, and I won't watch the CBC anymore. I can't. But they just had no fairness. And really, you're right. Like how if you got one guy saying I'm going to keep your job, and you got another guy saying I'm going to take your job away. What do you do, right?
yeah.
What do you do? But at that point, when are we now no longer a democracy? I mean,
Well,
what
well,
media is going to do it right?
well, okay. We're also in a situation where newspaper reporters who are covering this election campaign are receiving funds from the federal government.
What?
It was
What
an issue
funds?
that was raised in the last election campaign, but it seems to have fallen by the wayside. So how do we
What
know?
funds, Jeff?
Yeah,
What funds are they
well, the
receiving?
federal government is helping to fund print media in this country, is it not?
How?
Well,
I'm in print media. I run a print media business. So tell me how they're funding. I mean, we
Are
have what's
you
called
telling me that the Winnipeg Sun receives absolutely no assistance from the federal government?
no, there was a program that's called the Local Journalism Initiative, where they paid, I think it was 30 some odd $1,000 for one reporter, but they had to write on certain things and it had to be a certain way. And that's coming to an end. It just came to an end. For some papers, it's already ended. For some, it might end in a month or whatever, but it's over. So there's tax breaks for certain journalists, for, certain reporters and stuff like that, but it's not funding. You have to hire the staff. They have to be put in so many hours and you get a tax break for it. But there's all kinds of industries that have tax breaks. So, I mean, to sit there and say that, like, I'm looking, hey, listen, if the government wants to write me a check, write me a check. I'm not going to say what they want to say, so they're probably not going to line up at my door to give me money. But honestly, that's the reality. Is there was a local journalism initiative that had the Canadian government on there, and it kind of got blown out of proportion. The CBC gets way more funding than anybody else. There is the Google money, or the money, but I don't know. I call it the Google money that came from that hearing. But now we find out the CBC is going to get the bulk of that because they have more staff.
All right,
just
so yeah.
So I
Again,
don't know if that answers your question, Jeff. It always
well,
bothers
no, but okay,
me.
but but if you again, the CBC, the whole CBC conversation is a much longer conversation, I
Yeah.
think, about what the role of the CBC should be, what its scope should be, what its size should be, what what its editorial policies ought to be. It's but I think Canadians generally have turned to the CBC because private industry, private journalism in Canada has been shrinking very dramatically over the last couple of decades. Even the Toronto Star, still the biggest newspaper in the country, has about half the staff in its newsroom that it did 20 years ago. So people have turned to the CBC because that's where you can get somebody. That's where they still have warm bodies to actually produce the news. Now, is the CBC fair? Is it unbiased? Is it a true reflection of Canada and Canadian values? I would suggest not. I think the CBC lost its way a long, long time ago. But we're not going to go back to the days of Zosky and Frum and people like that, and Lister Sinclair, and some of the great voices that were on the CBC for many years. I think that argument, or that fight, if there's ever a fight, has been lost a long time ago. I think the CBC has kind of staked out its territory as very much of a left of center media outlet, but it gets everybody's money.
Well, we keep giving it money. And I mean, yes, journalism is taking a big hit. Newspapers, TV, radio, they're all taking a big hit in the private sector because people aren't supporting it. People don't buy subscriptions to newspapers. But some 21-year-old kid can do stupid things on YouTube and make $20 million a year. I mean, we'd be happy if we could make half that at the Winnipeg Sun. I mean, you just have to go on YouTube and, crack eggs over your head or whatever, and people watch it. Or I've seen things on X and YouTube where people are just making up conspiracy theories and pretending they're in a newsroom, and they got 1 million views. I mean, whose fault is that? That's our fault. That's not, I mean, that's just the fault of people. We start buying into that stuff. But the CBC kept getting handed money to keep going. And so, yeah, I guess they went left.
Yeah, and that's what's unfair. Even today we saw an example. A CBC journalist was in Washington, and she asked Trump's spokesperson, "Well, it seems like Trump is going easier on Canada. What's up with that? Or there's been a change of tone?" And of course, the person responds said, "No, there's been no change of tone. We think Canada should be the 51st state." And so that tonight, it's now Tuesday. That's going to be the big story in the media tonight. Is Trump reiterates threat to annex Canada. Well, that's almost like election interference. That's a journalist driving the advocacy of one issue that favors Mark Carney, that favors the Liberal Party. It was the threat of Trump was receding, which allowed Pierre Poilievre to make up a little bit of ground. And now, as a result of a CBC journalist intervention, her question, we're going to see this issue come back, at least temporarily. And so, once you kind of see these things when you're watching the CBC, you see them all the time.
You can create the narrative by asking a certain question.
Yeah.
And that's really what happens in politics a lot. And I guess, they give the money to the CBC. They don't give it to private industry, and people will complain, well, because the Winnipeg Sun doesn't get the funding or whatever, that we're just complaining about that. I look at it from this perspective. If you got politicians that are saying they're going to give more money to the CBC, like Carney says he's going to give more money to the CBC, and they're telling people to buy Canadian, they're putting more tariffs on American products coming in, they're doing all these different things. In the meantime, I met with a government official. I won't say who it was. Somebody in power. They are the sitting government, and said, how hypocritical is it of you guys to sit there and tell people to buy Canadian when I know you spend 83% or more of your spending budget on TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook, all these products that are not Canadian owned. But yet they're sitting there talking about this, and we're having this discussion about the failure of Canadian media, or I am anyways, and our own government's not supporting any other media except the CBC. So the tax breaks and all that, they only go so far, Jeff, because, I mean, if you're not making any money to pay at least the 80% of the reporter's salary, whether the government gives you a 20% credit or not, doesn't matter.
No, as you know, Kevin, the business model as it exists in Canadian media now doesn't support journalism as it once did. The business model just doesn't work anymore. Yeah. And that's true for television, radio, and print. And we don't know what the answer to that is. I think people have been looking for answers for a long time. At one time, all the media companies thought, well, we'll get a website and we'll make money off that. But most media outlets have not monetized their websites to anywhere near the extent they had hoped initially. And as the younger demo steers away from traditional media, becomes increasingly difficult to generate the necessary advertising revenue to pay for the journalism. Again, I don't have the answers, and I don't know that there are answers right now.
Yeah. Nope, you're right. I mean, it would be nice if the government or spent money on local advertising instead of spending money on TikTok and Instagram to get their message out. And I'm not just saying newspaper, spend it on local radio, spend it on local TV, spend it locally. I gave you the money, give it back. Just a little bit. Give a little bit of it back. That's what I would like to see. Look, I want to end this because we've been going on a bit long on that topic, and I apologize for that. The debate is Thursday night. The English debate is Thursday night. So I'm hoping we can circle back after the English debate, because I think that's when the game changes. That's at least what I think. Thoughts?
Well, we'll see how many people tune in. I think we've talked before that the interest in this election seems to be higher than it was last time around. So, we'll see how the interest in this debate is. Generally, it's the first 10 or 15 minutes of these debates that get the highest viewership, and then it drops off the table like a Salvador Dali clock right after that, after about 15 minutes. So it's whoever performs well in the first 15, maybe 20 minutes is going to wind up winning. But I think most people will, Royce, you might want to back me up on this. Most people will form their opinions of who won the debate based on the media analysis that they read the next day.
Bingo.
Not on whether or not they actually watched the debate, but the media analysis they read the next day.
The potential misinformation.
Yeah, we'll get real-time fact checking again. That's always so helpful. Usually debates don't make a difference. Every once in a while they do. Most of the time they don't. They just reinforce people's pre-existing biases and their pre-existing views. I think one issue we have in this election campaign is that a lot of people, including conservatives, have really amped up the expectations on Poilievre. They think, after watching him in question period, he's a very effective opposition leader. They think he's going to just tear Mark Carney limb from limb. I actually don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the format of the debate is going to allow that to happen. And the reality is that for both Carney and Poilievre, this is their first leaders debate. They're on relatively equal footing here. And so I would not have such high expectations here. I think there's real opportunities for Poilievre, but I think a win is a win. I think he'll outperform Carney, but I don't think it's going to be the kind of bloodbath that people are predicting.
All right. Well, I look forward to talking to you guys the day after so that we can get your feedback on that. Thank you very much for your time today.